So my name is Eric Meredith. I've been at OPI about 5 years now. I've spent 4 years working, this is the fourth year of this particular program. The early warning system has been developed works for down in sixth grade all the way up to seniors. The idea is to identify students that are at risk for dropping out, and hopefully well beforehand. The earlier we can identify those students, the better. So the Montana Early Warning System, I'm going to describe it a little bit here and how I've developed it using some of the data. I'm not going to go into too much depth into that. If you are interested in that, I have lots of graphs and statistics and data and all kinds of stuff that I can share. But I'm not going to get into that too much. I mostly want to show you the actual, the system actually working. First, what is the Montana Early Warning System? It is a statistical model that uses live data, and that live data is attendance, grades, behavior, and then some demographic information. I'll show you the actual variables here in just a little bit. It uses live data to determine the students that are at risk for dropping out. And as I mentioned, the idea here is to identify them as early as we can in the process, so that schools and school officials can help those students try and make sure that they graduate. How is the early warning system developed? The first thing that I did is I go in and compile my entire data set, which includes all the way back to 2007. The reason 2007 was chosen is that's the first year we had a statewide student information system. So I have statewide data from that year and going forward. You'll see I have 2015 in there. 2016 is not in the data set yet, obviously, because it's not the end of the school year. The end of the school year is always an exciting time for me because I get to add another year's data into my data set and see what kind of changes that makes. So going back to 2007, I have all the statewide data. You see the model, the linear or the logistic regression equation there. It looks very scary. It's really not. The end result is just a percent chance. It's just a percentage that the model spits out. And that percentage is the percentage chance that the student will drop out based on their current data, like their live data, their attendance rate and all that. So that's the end result of the model. The model does have some other things that kind of go along with that. And I will show you some of those here in just a little bit. But the big part of the model is just a percentage. It gives you a percent from 0 to 100% on the chance of that student dropping out. I know when I first started doing this, I would send out results to the schools, and they would always have, most schools will have a couple students that it'll be a 100% chance that the student drops out. And I got several calls of people wanting to know if that was right. And yes, based on their current data, it is correct. So those values can be anywhere from 0 up to 100%. There is a separate model for each grade, and I use the term grade lightly because for high school, it's not actually done by grade. In high school, it's done by how many years they've actually been in high school. So normally for a freshman, that would be 1 year of high school, then 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and there's actually a model for more than 4 years. So if a student comes back for a 5th or possibly even 6th year of school, there's separate models for those students. And then there's separate models for 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. For those grades, it is actually done by grade. Once they get in high school, it's done by how many years they've been in high school. The reason for that is the first year I did this, I actually did it by grade for all the way through, and I ran into some issues with that. One being, the main one being different schools progress students differently. So at one school in the state, a student that's been there for 2 years will automatically be a sophomore. Whereas at a different school, that student may need at least, say, 5 or 6 credits to become a sophomore and might still be classified as a freshman even though they've been there for 2 years. And so that caused some problems in the models. So to alleviate that, I just got rid of the grade requirement and said, we're just going to look at how many years they've been in high school. The other thing you might ask is why there are separate models for each grade. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One I just mentioned. The other main one is that at different grades, the students drop out for different reasons. At 7th and 8th grade, students tend to drop out different than the students that are seniors. The other reason is at different grades, different data is available. So, for example, if a student is on track to graduate as far as the number of credits that they've earned, that's not available for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders because they're not in high school yet and haven't earned any high school credits. So different models, I can put in different variables. So this next slide shows you the variables that are in the models. Now remember, there is a separate model for each grade. So every one of these variables does not go into every single grade. For example, I just talked about the credits per year and the on-track status. That obviously is not going to go into 6th, 7th, and 8th grade models. It also does not go into the first year of high school model because they haven't earned credits yet at that point. Because that data is not available for those students. So the variables here are separated into 2 different columns. On the left is the data that's collected by OPI. We have this data for every student in the state. It's part of the Infinite Campus Student Information System. That data we have for every single student. The student on the right is the data that's not collected by OPI. We do not have this data for all the students in the state. And that's an important distinction between these two. And I will show you why later, to actually use the early warning system. On the left, you see the collected by OPI column there. These are mostly, you'll see like the first 2 is if the student moved. First one, if the student moved this school year, and the second one's if they moved from out of state. If they move from out of state, that's at any time. It doesn't have to be during this school year. The third one, repeated grade in K through 8. It's just a yes or no. And this, as I mentioned, this is collected by OPI. This data doesn't have to be provided by the schools. We already have this. The next one, age difference, and this one's actually a big one. It's one of the stronger indicators here. I should mention all of these indicators have, they're called coefficients, but they're really just strength factors. Some of them are stronger than others. So each one of them has a coefficient or strength factor associated to it. And that strength factor changes for each grade, for each model, depending on which grade the student's in. So back to the age difference one, the age difference is basically just asking, is the student older for their particular grade than what they should be? It does not matter why that student's older. It just looks to see if the student is older or not. July 15th is the cutoff date that I use instead of September 10th, because a lot of times with September 10th, students that have a birth date close to September 10th is the statewide date normally that's used for the cutoff. And a lot of times those students that have a birth date close to September 10th, some of those students will start when they're 5, some of them will wait until they're 6, and so forth. So I found July 15th was actually a better cutoff date. The important part here on this age difference piece is the student, if the student's older or not. If they're younger, it makes no difference, but if they're older, and not only if they're older by 1 year, it's a strong effect, but if they're older by 2 years, it's a huge effect. And the model actually takes that into account, how much older they are than what they should be. And like I said, it doesn't matter why they're older. It doesn't matter if they repeated a grade, which is also one of the variables, if they just started school late, or whatever the reason is. It just looks to see if the student is older. I should mention that a lot of these variables, before I started this project, I found these variables as in other research throughout the nation as being important. And so then I checked to see if they were here too. This is one of those that shows up in research all across the nation as being a strong indicator. The next one, more than 2 school systems attended since 2007. School systems basically boils down to towns. If the student has been in more than 2 different school systems since 2007, then it's just yes. It's just a yes or no question here. 2007 is used because that was as I mentioned earlier, was the first year of the student information system for Montana. Gender does have a slight impact. It is not a huge factor, but it does have some impact. And then the last one there, percent of population below poverty level within the census tract. That's the census tract the school is located in. However, this particular variable, I believe every summer I update the models. I believe this summer this variable will probably be taken out. I've had some issues with this one. I'm trying to find a good variable for socioeconomic status. I tried meal status, that did not work. And this one does not seem to be working very well either. So that variable will most likely disappear. Yeah.
Sorry. You have a question on the board. The question is, do you have a summary document of the coefficient data for the data collected by OPI?
I do. Well, I have all the coefficients. If you mean the actual coefficients, the actual coefficients are, I have them all. I do not have them in a document anymore, but I do have them. They change every summer, so I don't put those in the document. I will show you a manual that I do have posted online, but it did not share the actual coefficients. The coefficients, like I said, they'll change every summer based on the new data and whether or not I remove some variables or put in new variables. So as of right now, I do not have those coefficients on there. But I will show you the manual that I have available. You also noticed there down at the bottom, over 250 variables have been analyzed. Usually it's closer to about 300. I pretty much looked at everything that I can possibly think of. One thing you may notice that is absent from those variables is assessment data. There's no assessment data there. When I first started this project, we were still doing the CRT, and I looked at the CRT to see if it would be usable here, and I found that it was not a very good indicator. The reading scores were pretty much worthless. The math did have some information to it, but it wasn't enough to put it into the model. I don't anticipate assessment ever being able to use assessment in these models, because even though we've started the Smarter Balance and I have high hopes for it, the problem is I need historical data. And I forgot to mention earlier, when I'm looking at my historical data to build the models, basically what I did is I compared dropouts to graduates and looked at what made up a graduate and what makes up a dropout. And so that's where I started with the model, is just finding out what makes up each of those individual students. Well, in doing that, I'm looking at the historical data. I need several years worth of data, especially for, say, like an 8th grader. I need 5 years worth of data before that student will either, graduate or drop out. So for the testing data, I don't anticipate assessment will ever be usable in the model because of that, and because of the fact that it tends to change over time. We changed from one test to another. So the variables on the right of these are attendance, grades, and behavior. Because OPI does not collect that information on a student level basis. The big ones here, attendance rate up at the top, and that's just the percentage of time the student is in school. And then the on-track status, those are probably two of the biggest ones. But all of these are strong. I have strong factors, but those are probably the two strongest ones. You'll see number of previous term Fs, number of previous term As. Does not matter what classes the A's or F's are in. It just counts up how many of each of those. Then the number of behavior events in the last 120 days. Behavior events is if the student was written up, usually. If the student was sent to the office, it doesn't matter if that student was suspended, if they were given a detention, or if they were just sent back to class. If the student was written up for some reason, it shows up as a behavior event. And in this case, it just counts those up. The next one is the number of out-of-school suspension events. This one works pretty much the same. It's just counting up the number of times that's occurred, but instead of 120 days, it's looking at the last 3 years. On track is just a yes or no, and that is whether or not the student is on track to graduate as far as credits go. This changes from school to school. So for example, the statewide minimum is a student must have at least 20 credits to graduate. Most schools require more than that. But if a student needs 20 credits to graduate, then they should average 5 credits or more per year, assuming they're there for 4 years. So the on-track status just looks to see if they're earning credits as they should to get that total. It does not look to see were those classes math or English or science or what were they. This is one of the stronger indicators here. And going along with that is the number of credits per year below that. And then the last two, the number of absences in the last 90 days and the number of absences in the last 60 days. Now, you might ask, why do we have both of those variables in there? And the reason for that is so that you can actually see if a student's behavior, or not behavior, but attendance is improving or getting worse during the school year. Remember, this is using lag data, so if a student's, say their attendance starts out bad and then starts getting better, the early warning system results would reflect that. And the other way around, if the student starts off with a high attendance, good attendance at the beginning of the year, and then starts dropping off, you can see that in these two variables.
So, high school dropout.
So those are the variables that are used in the models. Now, once again, not every variable is used in every single model, but most of them do go into most of the models.
Oh no, that's okay. Okay, that's okay. I'll just come over there and sit.
All right. So the next thing I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you the actual early warning system in practice and actually working. The early warning system is in GEMS. If you've seen GEMS data warehouse, and I'm going to show it to you in a little bit. It is available there. There are two different versions of GEMS. There's the public site and the secure site. The public site is available to anybody. Anybody can get on there and look at the data that's in the public site. The secure site is only available, you can only get access to it with a login and access rights. And you get the access rights by having the authorized representative at your school sign some paper and send that in. So there are 3 reports in GEMS. that go along with the early warning system. It's the school report, student summary report, and the student detail report. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you those here in just a second. The first thing I want to do though is hopefully this is working. Can everybody see the early warning system homepage on the
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is the homepage within GEMS. This is actually in the public version. There is a homepage in the public version just to let people know that it's there, that it's out there. You cannot look at results or upload any data on the public version because we can't look at results because the results are student level, which can't be shown on to just anybody. They have to be in the secure version. The reason I bring you to this site here is it gives a little bit of information about the early warning system, but the big piece that I wanted to show you is you look at the documents down here at the bottom, and one of the documents, the middle one, is the early warning system manual, and it actually explains a lot of things. I tried to keep it as short as possible. If I remember right, it's 16 pages. But it explains the upload process for the data. It explains some of the stuff that I've just described to you. And it also explains, more importantly, it explains the reports and what everything in all those reports means. The reason that's important is the reports are fairly comprehensive and there's a lot of different things in them. And it can be hard to remember everything that needs to be remembered. What does this flag mean, or what does this arrow mean? You can always refer back to the manual and see. The other two documents there, the data file template, that is what the data file that needs to be uploaded into GEMS needs to look like. And I will show you that process here in a little bit. And the bottom one is the GEMS access request form. That's the form that I mentioned before that needs to be filled out to gain access to the secure version of GEMS. So that is, as I said, the public version of the page, and that is the only early warning system page you will find within the public version. What I'm going to show you now is, and this page looks a little bit different because it's actually our test environment here at OPI. You have to be on the OPI servers to see this. But this is what the GEMS page will eventually look like. So the layout's a little different. But the functionality is all the same. You can see this is the home page that looks pretty much exactly the same as what you just saw. The only difference is down here at the bottom, there is a place to upload the data file. And so I've already uploaded data file today for the school that I'm going to show you. And I will say the school that I'm going to show you is a fake school that we put in here because, as I mentioned, it is student level data, so I can't just broadcast actual live reports to everybody. So all this data I'm showing you is completely fake from a completely made up school. So the first thing is I will go to the school level report, and in the school level report there's a drop down here that you can select your school or district. And yeah, I can reload the page. This page will only show you, when you select the drop down, it will only show you the schools that you have access to. So in the districts that you have access to. So in this case, the only school or district that I have access to with this particular login is the fake school that we set up. So I'm going to select the entire district for the fake school. I could look at each individual school. Some people will have more than one school that they'll have access to. Some people won't. So it just kind of depends on your situation. So I select the district and hit report. It actually takes a little bit of time in test because of it's a little slower in test than it actually is when it's live. But still, it's pretty fast, as you can see. So this is the school level report. There's only 14 kids in my fake school, so some of this school level report looks a little weird because there's only 2 kids per grade, because it's a lot of work to create these kids in a fake school. So the first thing I should mention is up here at the top, you can save this report in several different formats. For the school level report, either Word or a PDF is the best. When we developed all 3 of these reports, we tried to keep in mind, we kept them to 1 page. The only exception to that is student summary report, which I'll show you in a little bit. But we kept the reports to 1 page so that you could print them out, have them in front of you, and it wouldn't be several pages of data to look at. So you can do that. You can also print here with the little print button. So looking at the actual report, this is data. You can see the date is today's date. That's because I uploaded data earlier this morning. You can do 1 upload per day. If you do more than 1 per day, it will actually overwrite the first upload. And we designed it that way on purpose because if a school uploads data, we wanted them to have at least a buffer time of 1 day, so that if they uploaded data and found, oh, we uploaded the wrong data or something was wrong with the data, they can re-upload data that same day and it'll just overwrite the first one. However, if you wait until the next day to find your mistake, then you'll have to contact me and I can get rid of the erroneous upload. So you can see the dates today. I would have actually demonstrated the actual upload, but in this test environment, it's pretty slow, even though it's only 14 kids. Pretty fast on the live one. I do it for about 11,000 kids once a month, and it probably takes 3 minutes for 11,000 kids, and there's not a school in the state that has that many kids. So most of the time it takes 10, 15 seconds at the most. So you can see total students enrolled. That's not entirely correct. It's not necessarily the students enrolled or the number. It's the number of students that data has been uploaded for your particular school or district. So it's not necessarily your enrollment at your school. Below that, as I mentioned, is today's date because I uploaded a data set today. The last time I uploaded the data set into this fake school was March 17th. So it'll show you the dates of the last 2 times that you actually uploaded data. Below that is just a link to the student summary report, which I'll show you here in a little bit. Over on the left is a table that summarizes the results for your school. So students missing data, the early warning system will still work if a student is missing some data piece. You may remember the slide with all the data variables in it. If a student is missing one of those, the early warning system will still function, and right here it will let you know that how many students are missing data. And in a little bit I'll show you how you can find out exactly which data piece it is that's missing. So for my fake school, I had 1 student that is missing some form of data or another, which makes up about 7% of the 14 kids. The state average is about 4% for missing data. Now, you may be wondering, how does missing data occur that often? Well, the most common way is, you may remember previous term A's and previous term F's was in there. Well, sometimes if a student moves from a district to another, you don't necessarily have that information, or at least not right away. So that's a popular one to be missing. So students identified. This is the total number of students that have been identified as being at risk at your school. Some level of risk, I should say. So 6 of the 14 kids at this school have been identified for some level of risk, which makes up 43% of the student population at this school. State average is about 25%. So for this particular school, they might say, "Oh, well, we have more kids identified than others." The row below that, students at risk, is actually blank because there are no students that fit that category right now in my fake school. But students at risk and students extreme risk, the next row, the difference between those, there's basically 3 risk levels in the early warning system. So you remember the end result of the model is a percentage, the percentage chance that a student will drop out. Students from 0 to 15% are labeled as no or low risk students. Okay, those are not the ones that are marked on this table. Students that are between 15 and 40% are marked as at risk. For my fake school right now, there aren't any of those students that have between a 15 and 40% chance of dropping out. And then extreme risk is the students that have greater than 40% chance of dropping out. And you'll see that all 6 of the students that are identified at this school right now are at extreme risk. You can also see the state averages over to the right, which are much lower than the 40-some% for my fake school here. But it gives you something to compare your school to others without actually having to see their data. So the graph below that, what the graph below that shows you is it's broken down. You can see by grades, so 6th grade, 7th, 8th, and then 1 year of high school, 2, 3, 4, and then all grades combined. As I mentioned at the beginning, there is a model for students to have more than 4 years, but it doesn't show up in this graph. And the reason is because usually there's only 1 or 2, maybe 3 or 4 of those students in your school. And so the graph here does some weird things when it's only got that number of students. Matter of fact, that's why this graph is weird, because there's only 2 students at each grade. Since there's only 2 students at each grade, this graph can only be 0%, 50%, or 100%, which can make it look a little odd. So it's broken down by grade, and then for each grade, you have the state average, the current early warning system run, and the previous. And what each one of these bars shows you is the percentage of kids that are being identified as some level of risk for each grade. So for the current upload, they just uploaded data for 6th grade, half of the kids are being identified as at some level of risk. Remember, there's only 2 kids in 6th grade in my fake school, so one of them's identified, one is not.
I don't know if he's doing it as a high.
Now you will notice there are 2 different colors to the graph. The blue color is, the light blue color is the percentage of students that are at risk, and the purplish color is the percentage of students that are at extreme risk. If you hover over the bars, a percent shows up, and that's the case with all of them. But what you can do here, there's several things you can compare here. You can compare your current data to the previous time data was uploaded. So basically you can see at your school, are things getting worse or better for 6th graders at our school? Or are they getting worse and better for kids that are in their 2nd year of high school? So that's one thing you can compare with the current and the previous data runs. You can also compare to the state average to see if your school is doing better or worse than the state average. And these vary greatly from school to school. Some schools will have a lot more kids identified than others. But you can compare it to the state average, or you can compare it to your previous data uploads. You can do that for each grade or all of the grades combined. So that's what the first graph there is for. The ones down here, the 4 graphs towards the bottom, are for the risk factors. There's 4 different risk factors shown here. If a student, basically what this is showing the percentage of students that are identified for these reasons as being a risk factor. So there's grades, behavior, mobile students, and attendance. And basically what the graph shows you is the percentage of kids. and it's broken down the same way. It has broken down by grade, and then each bar, some of the bars are hard to see here, but each bar, the blue is the statewide average, the red is the current early warning system run, and then the green is the previous early warning system run. So the same thing here. You can see the percentage of kids at each grade for each one of these factors and compare to your previous data and compare to the statewide average. So it's hard to see here because, like I said, this school only got 2 kids in each grade. But sometimes a school would be able to look at this graph and say, oh, we have a bigger problem with sophomores for attendance than statewide. Or we don't have a problem with mobile students compared to other schools. There's lots of things that can be gained from looking at these graphs. Unfortunately, in the fake school, it's kind of hard to read because, once again, they're all either 0, 50%, or 100%. So it's hard to see. So what I'm going to do next is take you to the student summary report. There's 2 ways to get to it. You can click on the link there, or over here you go to the student summary report. It will take a little time for this to come up. Basically, what the student summary report is it's basically an Excel spreadsheet that lists all of the students in one spreadsheet. So the school report has a lot of uses, say for the administration, maybe for the school board, for groups to look school-wide, how are we doing. The student summary report is the one that I recommend for, say, your MTSS teams, your MBI teams, your Graduation Matter team, which a lot of times is all the same thing, or the same group of people. Because this report allows you to look at all of your students at once. So, once again, I can select my school or district that I'm interested in looking at. I'll select the entire district. And this report, as I mentioned, is just an Excel spreadsheet. And once again, you can save it. I would recommend saving this as an Excel file. You can save it as the other versions, but it ends up looking pretty funky. So this particular report lists all 14 of the students that are in this fake school. And it's hard to see in this report, but the report is sorted by grade. So the seniors are at the top, then juniors, then sophomores, freshmen, and so forth. Then, among the seniors, the one with the highest percentage is at the top. The one with the lowest percentage is at the bottom. That's hard to see here because there's only 2 students, but it does organize them with all of the highest risk students at the top, the lowest ones at the bottom. So this is a good report, as I mentioned, for the teams, your Graduation Matters teams or your MTSS teams to look at all the students at once. So the report basically, it has the school name. You may have more than one school you're looking at a time. The name of the student, the state ID. As you can see, these are all fake because state IDs are letters instead of numbers. The number of years the student's been in high school, their grade, and then the dropout probability. So this is the percentage that I was talking about that the model actually spits out. So based on the current data for these students, this is the percentage chance that these students will drop out. You'll see the top students almost 100%, 99.6% chance. But some of them are very low. The one right below that is 0.1%. The next column is the change column, and it's just an arrow. And it lets you know if there's been a change in that percent the previous time the data was uploaded. Each one of the arrows designates something a little different. The straight up, now remember we want the percent to go down because it's the percentage chance a student will drop out. So you want this percent to go down. The straight up arrow, which is red, means that the percentage for that student went up by 5% or more. There's a couple students down here at the bottom. Straight down arrow, which is green, means the student's percentage went down by 5% or more. And these are ones that we want to see because that means the percentage is going down. No arrow means the change was less than 1%. The diagonal arrows point in the direction that the student's moving, and it means change is between 1 and 5%. You can also see, so this student was 9.9% chance of dropping out for the current data upload. Over here to the right a ways, you can see the percentage from the previous time the data was uploaded. And you can see the difference between those is more than 5%, so that red arrow shows up. The next column, ESP, is the estimate column. All that shows up is an asterisk. That asterisk just lets you know that that is the student that is missing some data. So this is the one student in this data set that's missing data, and that you can actually go in and see which data piece is missing. I will show you that in a little bit. The reason this is important and the reason it says ESP or estimate is for the early warning system to still work, the missing data piece has to be replaced with something. And so what it's doing here is it's replacing the missing data for that student with the statewide average. So that's why the asterisk shows up. Then the next 7 or so columns are the indicators. So these are the risk factors, why that student is, so for example, the top student, Jill Anderson, the risk factors for him are attendance, grades, he's off track as far as credits go, mobility, and the student is a previous dropout, so he's dropped out previously. So the other two that do not show up for the student is behavior and age. So it just lists the actual risk factors for each individual student. Then the percent from the previous time, I already talked about that. And then these last 4 columns they're actually odd if you're familiar with logistic regression. But basically what you can think of them then is as the risk factor. So you'll see behavior, attendance, grades, and mobility. Basically, a student, if the number is above 1.25, that means the kid will get flagged for that particular risk factor. So you can see this student attendance was 28, so the attendance flag showed up. Grades was 39, so the grades flag shows up. Mobility 2, so mobility shows up. These numbers are actually, they are also on a scale. So the bigger the number, that means that factor is more of an effect for that particular student. What these numbers actually mean is, so for this one here, 28.09, that means that this student is 28 times more likely to drop out because of attendance than your average student. So that is the student summary report. The last one I want to show you is the student detail report. And this is just as the name implies, it is a report for each individual student. So when you come to this report and go to the drop-down, it'll list all the student names. It's organized by their first name, alphabetically by their first name. You can also see the state IDs, which in this case are fake and letters. So I select one of these, and I'll go to the report, hit load. And this is the student detail report. A lot of the same information that was just in the student summary report is here, plus some additional things. So at the top, and once again, you can save it as a Word file or PDF for the 2 recommendations, or you can actually print it out. It's just a 1-page report. The idea was to try and keep these reports to 1 page. This report can be used, it's being used in a lot of different ways for different schools. Some schools are actually using it, for example, at parent-teacher conferences, or actually using it to actually talk to the student and say, hey, this is what your percentage is. And that differs between, the student, the individual student and the school. There's lots of ways this can be used. So at the top is just the student name and the state ID. Then over here, the risk level. this particular student is an extreme risk student because the dropout probability you can see is above 40%. So then the percentage actually shows up as a dark red also. At the far left here is just all of the data that went into the model for this particular student. You can actually see, so for example, the attendance rate. You can actually look and see what attendance rate was entered for this student. That is there so that if you see a percent and think, well, that seems strange for this student, you can check to make sure that the data that's being entered for that student is correct. You will notice these two, previous term A's and F's, are red, and that's because this is the student that is missing some data. The student's missing both previous term A's and previous term F's, the number of them. That's also why this asterisk shows up, because of that missing data. Below that, the dropout risk factors. The first three are just, if they're yes, that means that they are, that is a risk factor, and it shows up red with an exclamation mark next to it. If it's no, that's not a risk factor for that student. The next four are the odds that I talked about earlier, the risk factors. And once again, if they're 1.25 or higher, then they show up as a risk factor. Over here on the right is these are the results for the early warning system for the previous 12 times the data has been uploaded. And it will track for as long as it takes to get 12. Once it gets to the 13th one will drop off and you won't be able to see it anymore. But it will track the previous 12 times. Now, this is useful for several reasons. One being you can track the student over time and see if things are improving or getting worse. And that's important. So, for example, if we look at this particular student, let's say at the beginning of this school year, so at the beginning of this school year, it looks like the percent was about 82%. Let's say at the beginning of the school year for this particular student, you started this student on an intervention program. You could see for this particular student, the percentage is actually going down. It's been going down all the way through the school year. So you could basically, you're looking at this and saying, okay, so the intervention is working for this student. It is at least helping the student in getting the percent down. Now, the student still got a high percent, but it's getting better. So that's one way that you can use this. And that actually leads me to, I'm hoping to create a fourth report in the early warning system that will actually be an intervention report. You would put in when students started an intervention, and then the intervention report will tell you if that intervention is working at your school for all of your students. That is not available yet. I'm hoping to have that available by next school year. So if you're interested in that, just feel free to contact me. Then down below that, the graphs below that, this first one is just the dropout probability over time. You may remember, so up here at the beginning of the year, it was about 82%. That's this graph. You can see throughout the school year, the percentage has been dropping. So you can actually see that graphically here. It's easier to see than looking at the table up above. And then the four graphs at the bottom track the risk factors over time. So remember, you want these risk factors to go lower. Mobility doesn't change much because the student has to move for it to change. Grades will change every term, usually quarter. Has not changed much for this student. Behavior will change either when a student gets in trouble or when it's been enough days that some of their past behavior things drop off. And it appears that's what's the case with this student. This student, in the last couple, you can see the behavior risk factor has gone down, and so has the attendance risk factor. So that's why the student's percentage has gone down, is because attendance gotten better, and so has behavior. So that is the student detail report. As I mentioned at the beginning, there is a lot of stuff here, and it's hard to remember all of this. You know, what does this asterisk mean? What does the arrow mean? All of that. That's why that manual is back there on the overview page, is because it explains all of that and what everything means in that manual. So that is pretty much my presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be willing to take those now.
This is Marla. Do you generate this data from OPI for all schools automatically? What do they need to do, I mean, from their perspective?
Okay, so I have a list of pilot schools that I do it for them. And that's a list of 13 school systems throughout the state. For the other schools that are not one of those pilot schools, you need to upload the data that in this, or here on the overview page, you'll upload the data. Matter of fact, I'll go ahead and open up this. Hopefully this will work. I wouldn't open it. I have a better idea. I can actually show you the file that I uploaded for the fake school that I just showed you. Okay, so this is the Excel spreadsheet that I uploaded today for that fake school. This is what would have to be generated by a school that is not participating in the pilot schools that I have. Now, there is some help in generating this. So first of all, just to go over this file real quick, the state ID is first, and then you've got the variables that have to be uploaded, the attendance rate, previous term Fs, previous term As, and so forth. Each row is a different student. So the state ID is what identifies each one of the students. So for each student that you would want data for, you would have to upload this. They would have to be included in this spreadsheet. Now, to generate this file, for example, if you are a district edition of Infinite Campus school, there is an extract that we've been working with Infinite Campus with that will pull out this information exactly as needed when you use that extract. That is assuming that things are set up correctly in Infinite Campus. If you are an Infinite Campus school that's a district edition, before you do that upload the first time, I would, pulling that data, I would contact me just to make sure that everything is set up and looking good for that data extract. But to answer your questions, no, I don't do the entire state, but I can certainly help you also in getting that done. I'm also working with Schoolmaster and PowerSchool in developing some extracts to get this data into an Excel spreadsheet in this form from those student information systems also.
Thank you. Very nice.
Any other questions?
Hi, Eric. This is Susan Running. I think this is great information. I guess my question is, when you have students at severe risk or at risk, is there interventions provided, or is that up to the school to initiate?
That is up to the school, and this has actually been a pretty popular topic lately at some of the conferences and stuff I've been to. It is completely up to the school to decide which intervention the student goes into, although I should go back and show you, there's one more slide that I had. There's actually more than one, but I had in my slides, I've got pages for each one of the reports that I just showed you, so I'll skip over those. But on this last page, it shows the at-risk tiers, and generally in these different programs, these are the percentages, I mean these are estimated, that you would expect to be in each one of those tiers. 80% in Tier 1, 15% in Tier 2, and 5% in Tier 3. When you look at the early warning system, the breakdown looks more like this, with about 15% in the top 2 tiers, and then about 70% in Tier 1. Part of the reason these percentages are higher is because at lower grades, down at 6th, 7th grades, a lot of kids seem to get into the extreme risk percentage. But we do not provide actual interventions. This is mostly to help identify the students that need the intervention. The intervention's left up to the school, partially because each school has their own things that they do that are all different. I should show you this last page. If anybody has any questions or would like to contact me about maybe using this, my contact information is there.